Hi everybody, I hope this video finds you doing well today. We are going to be talking about los verbos reflexivos, or reflexive verbs in English. You see these very commonly used. Reflexive verbs are anything that you do to yourself. So think about I shower, I brush my teeth. Well, if you're brushing your own teeth, if you're showering yourself, those are reflexive things. Um, when you say, I wash my hands, that's reflexive if you're washing your own hands. So they're things that you do to yourself. Now, if you say, I'm washing my dog, or I'm giving my dog a bath, that's not reflexive, right? Because you're not doing it to yourself. Some common reflexive verbs that we see are acostarse, to go to bed or to lie down, afeitarse, to shave oneself, arreglarse, to get ready, to prepare oneself, to fix oneself up, bañarse, to bathe, cepillarse, to brush, despertarse, to wake up, ducharse, to shower, lavarse, to wash, so on and so forth. You see a whole list here of various verbs. So first I want to talk to you about how to conjugate a reflexive verb, and then I'm going to give you a chance to practice a few of these on your own. So uh, before you can conjugate a reflexive verb, you do need to recall back to your basic AR, ER, and IR conjugations in the present tense in Spanish. So think about your AR verbs. Take a verb like, say, hablar, and recall you're going to chop off your AR on the end, left with the stem, HABL, which you see in the bottom box here. You're then going to add some endings, and our appropriate AR verb endings in the present tense are o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. So we end up with hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, habláis, and hablan. You may also recall that there are verbs that end in ER and IR in Spanish as well. So take a basic verb like comer, to eat. Remove your ER off of the ending. You're left with the stem, COM, and then you're going to add those appropriate ER endings. O, es, e, hemos, es, in. So say those with me. For an AR verb, we have repitan, o, as, a, amos, ais, an. For an ER verb, we have repitan, o, es, e, hemos, es, en. And finally, for an IR verb like escribir, to write, you're going to remove the IR, and again, we're adding back a different set of endings, very similar to your ER endings. We'll say those together. Repitan, o, es, e, imos, is, en. So notice, for an ER verb, we have hemos and es, whereas for an IR verb, we have imos and is. This gives you a quick little review of basic conjugations in the present tense. Now, of course, your reflexives can take place in any tense. Instead of saying I shower, me ducho, you can say I showered, me duché, or I was showering, me estaba duchando, right? You can put these in various different conjugated forms, but the overall process of how we conjugate a reflexive verb does not change. So we'll take a look at some examples. What's different about these reflexive verbs, if you notice, all of these verbs end in se, they end in se. So I always tell students to remember a reflexive verb in Spanish ends in se. And the first thing we have to do, we have to get that se out of the way, right? Before we can conjugate your AR, your ER, your IR endings, you got to do something with the se and get it out of the way. So what we typically do, we move the se to the very beginning. We put it in front of our conjugated verb, and that reflexive pronoun will change based on the subject of the person to whom you're referring. So instead of saying se for everything, if you're talking about yourself, like I wash, we have me lavo. The se changed to me, literally to or for me, I'm washing. When you're talking about you in the tu form, your se changes to te. In the él, ella, usted form, it remains as se. In the nosotros form, it becomes nos. In the vosotros form, it becomes os. And in the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, it remains se. Your verb then can be conjugated as normal. Lavar, you just chop off your AR and add your normal endings. So I want to do a couple of examples with you, and I'm going to have you in just a moment pause your audio and give a few of these a try on your own. Let's take the verb cepillarse, for example. To conjugate this verb cepillarse, first we need to get rid of the se, because we can't do anything to the AR with the se in the way. So we got to move the se around. We're going to take this se, and we're going to move it to the front, in front of our verb. And the se becomes me, te, se, nos, os, or se, depending on your respective subjects. Now we're left with the verb cepillar, which we can conjugate by chopping off the AR. We know how to do that, right? We're using our normal AR endings we were just talking about, o, as, a, amos, aisan. And we're going to take those and we're going to apply them to the verb cepillar. So instead of saying to brush oneself, we now get me cepillo, I brush. Te cepillas, you brush. Se cepilla, he or she brushes. So on and so forth. Nos cepillamos, os cepilláis, and se cepillan. Okay? To help you to sort of illustrate this concept, I have a short little video that is quite comical and will get stuck in your head. I think you'll appreciate the song. It should help you remember how to conjugate these reflexive verbs. So bear with me for just one moment.
Hola. So I've noticed over the years that people have a problem understanding how reflexive verbs work in Spanish. Especially for English speakers, they can be confusing because it's almost like memorizing a mathematical function or something just to use them. So I came up with a song for you to help change those silly reflexive verbs. You might watch the videos where we talk about reflexive verbs if you haven't yet, but either way, enjoy the song. During the song, you'll notice the lyrics being demonstrated at the bottom of the screen with a few different examples of reflexive verbs. Feel free to sing along once you get the hang of it, and I'll sing it 3 times. A reflexive verb in Spanish ends in say. First you gotta get the say out of the way. Then the verb you have to change, and the say you rearrange, and the say becomes mete, no, sos, or se. A reflexive verb in Spanish ends in say. First you gotta get the say out of the way. Then the verb you have to change, and the say you rearrange, and the say becomes mete, no, sos, or se. A reflexive verb in Spanish ends in say. First you gotta get the say out of the way. Then the verb you have to change, and the say you rearrange, and the say becomes mete, no, sos, or se.
Okay, so I think you can see how this works. You do have to get the say out of the way before you do any type of conjugating. While that video may be incredibly annoying or you may not like the song, it definitely is helpful pedagogically to make sure you understand how to do this. So I want to give you one to try now. This is the verb duchar, which means to shower oneself. So I want you to conjugate ducharse and tell me I shower, you shower, he or she showers, so on and so forth. So take a moment, pause your audio, and when you're ready, you can unpause. Okay, let's take a look here. So ducharse. Remember, the first thing we need to do is get the say out of the way. So we have me, te, se, nos, os, or se, all followed by duchar. Next, we're going to chop off that AR. We need to add some appropriate endings for an AR verb. Again, we use o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. So we end up with me ducho, te duchas, se ducha, nos duchamos, os duchais, and se duchan. Hopefully you're feeling okay about these. This is where things get tricky. Remember you learned about stem changing verbs back in Spanish 1, where the verb only stem changes when it's inside the boot or the shoe. So here you see, for example, for prior reference, the verb poder, where we changed the O to a UE everywhere when it was inside of the boot. So I did not change up here in the nosotros or the vosotros because it was not in the boot. We're going to take that and apply that here to this verb acostarse. Again, what you've learned before, your se is just going to change like it always did before to me, te, se, nos, os, or se. What's different here is that instead of just chopping off the AR, you also have to change the O in acostarse, which, by the way, the verb acostarse means to go to bed. We're going to change that O to a UE in the boxes when it's inside of the boot. So everything except for the nosotros and vosotros. So we get me acuesto, te acuestas, se acuesta, nos acostamos, os acostáis, and se acuestan. Notice up here we left the O alone. We did not change it to a UE because it was not in the boot. And we're just using our regular AR verb endings here in green. Okay, I want to give you one of these to try now. This is the verb despertarse, which is the same kind of thing. Despertarse has a stem change from E to IE. So I want you to go through and conjugate all of these verbs for me, okay? Pause your audio, and when you're ready, you can unmute. All right, so remember, first thing we're going to do, we're going to take our se, move it to the front, and we're going to change it to its appropriate reflexive pronoun. So me, te, se, nos, os, or se. Next, we are left with the verb despertar, which we know is a stem change from E to IE. We also know it's only going to change when it's inside of the boot. So we're going to go ahead and carry that down, changing our E to an IE in all of the boxes except for the nosotros and vosotros. We're going to chop off our AR and add the appropriate endings, o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. So we end up with me despierto, I wake up. Te despiertas, you wake up. Se despierta, he or she wakes up. Nos despertamos, we wake up. Os despertáis, you all in Spain wake up. And se despiertan, they wake up. I also want to bring to your attention that this can also happen, all the verbs we've looked at so far just happen to be AR verbs, but you also can have reflexive verbs and stem changing verbs that end in ER or IR, right? So I want to take a look at this word from your vocabulary sheet, vestirse, which means to dress oneself, to get dressed. Vestirse is a stem change from E to I. So the difference here, really there's not a huge difference. It's just instead of using the AR verb endings, we're going to be using our IR verb endings since vestir was an IR verb. So the first thing we're going to do, just like before, we're going to take our se, move it to the front. It changes to me, te, se, nos, os, or se. With vestir, we know that it changes from E to I, so we're going to go ahead and do that in all of the boxes except for the nosotros and vosotros. Next, we're going to go ahead and chop off our IR ending, and we're going to add the appropriate IR verb endings in its place. So we end up with me visto, te vistes, se viste, nos vestimos, os vestís, and se visten. This should be SE here, se visten. Okay, so these are all of your appropriate endings. Now, I want to talk to you for just a moment about the placement of these reflexive pronouns. In all of these examples, when we were conjugating, we put the reflexive pronoun in front of our conjugated verb. We had me despierto, we had se visten, so on and so forth. I recommend that you put it in front of your conjugated verb. If you're ever unsure where to put pronoun in Spanish, I always tell students, put it in front of your conjugated verb. It's never going to be wrong in front of your conjugated verb. Okay, now, you have some other options. You also could attach it to the infinitive if you have an infinitive in your sentence, or you could attach it to the participle, which is most commonly seen in the present progressive tense. And I do have a separate video for you on the present progressive if you're unsure of what that is. You can watch that video and find out. But here's some examples for you with the same verb. I'm using cepillarse los dientes, to brush one's teeth. The first example here is kind of what you were doing in your boxes. Me cepillo los dientes. I brush my teeth. We put the me, our reflexive pronoun, in front of our conjugated verb cepillo. That's the easiest way to do it. Now, in other contexts, you may be saying things like, instead of I brush my teeth, I'm going to brush my teeth. So in that context, we've used the verb ir, which has been conjugated in the yo form to voy, and we're saying that voy a cepillarme los dientes. I'm going to brush my teeth. In this case, the me, our reflexive pronoun, was attached to the verb cepillar, to brush. It would also be acceptable in this sentence to say, me voy a cepillar los dientes. However, this is the most common way you will see this, is attached here to your infinitive. So, voy a cepillarme los dientes. Finally, with the present progressive, our ing tense in Spanish, you may also see your me attached to the participle, which you see here at the end. Estoy cepillándome los dientes. And there are some rules about when you begin attaching an accent falls in a certain place, and I won't get into all of those nitty-gritty details for you here in this video, but I just want you to be aware of where these pronouns can be placed. Again, either in front of your infinitive, or excuse me, in front of your conjugated verb, which is my recommended scenario for doing this. Your other option would be to attach your reflexive pronoun to the infinitive in your sentence, or you can attach your reflexive pronoun to the participle if you're using the present progressive tense. So those are your three options here. So me cepillo los dientes, voy a cepillarme los dientes, or estoy cepillándome los dientes. Okay? I want you to take a moment and practice what we've been learning here. I kind of mixed all these together. You may have some that are attached, some that are together, etc. I want you to give these a try, pause your audio, and when you're ready, you can unmute. All right, let's take a look at these. So number one says, yo lavarse las manos. So I and to wash my hands. I want to say that I wash my hands in this case. So with lavarse, I know that I need to remove the se. I know that when I'm talking about myself, my se changes to me. And then with lavar, I'm going to chop off my AR, and I end up with me lavo. Yo me lavo las manos. In number two, the sentence is very similar, but notice in number two, there's a conjugated verb in our sentence. We have yo quiero, I want, and then lavarse las manos. So I want to wash the hands. Well, in this case, you do not need to conjugate lavar because you're not saying I want I wash, which is what would happen if you said lavo. You're trying to say I want to wash. So yo quiero lavar, and then my se still changes to me because I'm washing my own hands. So yo quiero lavarme las manos. In number three, you see de vez en cuando mis amigas secarse el pelo, pero no lo hacen mucho. So every once in a while, my friends dry their hair, but they don't do it often. We're going to take that verb secarse to dry. We know that the se will move to the front, and when I'm talking about my friends or they, it remains as se. For secar, we chop off our AR, and we should be adding back an AN. Se secan el pelo, they dry their hair. In number four, mis hermanos menores nunca bañarse. My younger brothers never bathe themselves. That's kind of gross. We're going to take bañarse. We are going to move our se to the beginning in front of our conjugated verb because we know that my younger brothers would be they. Using our bottom right box, we still have se as our reflexive pronoun. For bañar, we're going to chop off the AR, and at the end we should be adding back an AN, se bañan. Mis hermanos menores nunca se bañan. And finally, in the question in number five, we see a qué hora, and our verb is despertarse. Remember, despertarse has a stem change from E to IE. Our se, in this case, will change to te when we're asking what time do you get up. A qué hora te despiertas. And then for despertar, we removed the AR and we added back an AS in the to form. A qué hora te despiertas. So I hope this video has been helpful to you. As always, if you have any questions, I'm always here to help you. Feel free to drop me an email at any time. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.